I'm Mandy Friedman, licensed professional clinical counselor and a clinically certified domestic violence counselor and the creator of the SNAP program, which is Survivors of Narcissistic and Abusive Personalities. Today I'm going to talk about parental alienation, but not just any type of parental alienation. We're going to talk about narcissistic parental alienation. A lot of my clients who share children with a toxic parent find themselves in this position, and it just gets really frustrating, really confusing. So let's dig in, shall we? What is parental alienation? Well, you can Google this, and there's a lot of different stuff out there for it, but basically there is a toxic or manipulative parent who is actively seeking to win the mind of the child and poison them against the other parent. And the reason why, and we'll get more into it here in a few minutes, the reason why it's so confusing is that if the alienating parent, meaning the manipulative parent, is also an abusive person, right? Then you have the healthy parent, or let's just say non-abusive parent, empathic parent, who would like to protect their children, from the type of treatment that they know is going to happen with the narcissistic manipulative parent. So what happens is we want to stick up for our children and protect them, but then we get cast in the role of being the alienating parent, right? And it gets really murky. I want to read something that someone sent me, and she gave me permission to do this, and I'm going to change some of the information so that it's not personal to her, revealing. I wanted to say your videos are super informative. I'm dealing with my ex who lives in another state, and I live in Ohio. He thinks that I'm a bad parent, tries to make me look crazy. He has my son lie to me and talk to me about our court orders and how he wants them to change it so that there's less time with him. And this toxic parent has done everything that we've talked about in these videos and more, she says. So she feels pretty confident that this is what she's dealing with in terms of dealing with a narcissist or narcissistic abuse. Saying that I'm the one doing the things he's doing, right? Blaming me for things that aren't true, and always trying to argue with me over talking points. I'm trying to take him to court, and he's blaming me for things that aren't true. And maybe you can touch on some of the ways to deal with the stress and how to counteract the way our brains work when they are abusing both the mother and the child for standing up for themselves. Okay, because really that's what's going on. You'll even have kids that are like, thank God he's gone. I don't want to spend time with him. And the wife is like, thank God he's gone. Our lives are so much better. But then here comes the court system saying, well, even though the child doesn't want it, even though there's evidence that the father may not be on the up and up. And by the way, I understand I'm being gender specific here, but this happens the other way around, okay? So I don't need for anybody to remind me of that. I'm aware that it happens both ways in terms of gender. But women really get a tough rap on this topic. I was just watching a video. This woman was saying to other women, your children don't see their father just because you're trying to prove a point, because you got pregnant and he didn't marry you, or he decided he wanted to break up with you and not date you anymore, and so now you're punishing him by keeping his kids away from him. Does that happen? Sure, absolutely it happens. That's not what we're talking about today, though, okay? And also keep in mind, this is a huge topic, so we're just going to scratch the surface here, but we're going to answer a few questions, and that is, what is parental alienation? Why do narcissists attempt alienation? How do they do it? And why is it so confusing for everyone? Okay, so what is parental alienation? Like I said before, you have a manipulative, toxic, narcissistic parent who is actively working to win the mind of the child or brainwash the child into believing that the other parent is the bad parent, that other parent is truly the toxic parent. So why do they do this? Okay, why do narcissists do this? Well, they want to maintain control, first and foremost. They don't like being told what to do, especially not by their ex or by children. Well, women and children, generally, they don't like to be told what to do. They don't like to be told what to do by the courts. They don't want to be told what to do by their own lawyer sometimes. So they want to maintain control. And by having control over the kids, then that makes them, by proxy, have control over their ex-partner. And then it also gives them a way to coercively control the empathic parent by controlling schedules, pickup times, holidays, birthdays, phone calls, that, you know, every time you interact with this person, because they are going to be interacting with your kids, that gives them influence over you. And they really enjoy that. They really enjoy that you have to hop, you know, because they said so, or, you know, or they will fight in court for a parenting plan and then not follow the plan. Yeah, so you see that kind of stuff. And then when you try to go and like point that out, it seems like that you're trying to alienate them. Look, here they are trying to establish relationship with their children. And what, you're upset because he shows up 10 minutes late? You know, like, goodness. No, it's because of the crazy making shenanigans that I can't deal with. Okay, so they like to control you through the children. And then it's just a way to keep connected to the empathic parent. You know, it leaves the door open for texts and emails and things of that nature. They like drama and chaos too, and so it keeps those conflicts going. And it helps them fabricate evidence. So what I mean by that is that they use reactive abuse, right? So they're going to push you and poke you and threaten you, you know, and eventually you just can't take it anymore and you'll crack, you know, and you'll have a response. And guess what? That's when they've got the camera on. That's when there's people watching. That's when he's going to document it, and it's going to make you look like that you're the bad guy, but actually they pushed you to that limit. So in some ways, parental alienation, it works so well because of that reactive abuse factor, that there's these things happening that no one believes, that you can't even talk about, right? Because you don't want to be the alienating parent. We're going to get to that in a second. So you can't even really discuss it. And then also the most important reason why, okay? This is the most important reason why a manipulative narcissistic parent would use parental alienation. And that is to maintain their victim narrative, right? This has happened to them. Poor them. You know, and they only get to see their kids now every other weekend, and it's just awful. And this terrible ex is trying to keep the children away from him. And they usually want to be moving on pretty quickly in new relationships. So having the children makes them look normal, makes them look like a good parent. So often what I'll see is somebody who hasn't really cared too much about spending time with the kids while they were in the home and the parents were still together. And now suddenly, you know, they want to have this relationship, and then you realize, oh, there's a girlfriend. That's why, right? Because think about it in dating. If you're dating someone, they're like, yeah, I don't really have time with my kids too often. It's like, why? You know, how come? And they're not going to say, oh, because I'm a terrible alcoholic and I used to beat my wife. Are they? No, of course not. They're going to paint themselves as the victim. And then that new partner will even help them, gang up with them. They'll become a flying monkey to try to rescue them from their circumstance that this evil ex-partner is keeping their children from them. So they flip it all around, and then they work it to their best interest. and using the children sort of as arm candy in a way, like, look, I'm normal and I'm a good parent. And they post it all over Facebook, and I love my kids so much. But, you know, how do they achieve this? Well, we have subtle and overt sabotage. And I think that kind of explains itself. I'm trying to think of an example. But it could just be things like just riding that line of compliance. You know, they'll do just enough to where it's, you know, maybe not quite on target, but it's also not bad enough that's worth even saying anything. But it leaves you it leaves you living in this sort of constant state of what's going to happen next, because they never follow the plan, but they'll just do it enough that if you say something, it seems like you're being picky or critical or overreacting, or that you just have it in for them no matter what they do. So they push you just enough sometimes. And they use misinformation. So they'll say things to the kids that just flat out aren't true. One example that I heard was this woman had just and wasn't able to replace the tires on her car because she wasn't receiving her child support, and he left her high and dry to fend for herself. So there were these things like shoes, tires that needed to be purchased, and she didn't have the money, and her friends all chipped in to get those items for her. Then when the father, the narcissistic parent, was picking up the children, they get in the car and he says, oh, I see your mother is spending my child support money on new shoes for herself and new tires for herself. Sure must be nice. Well, the truth is that he hadn't been paying child support and she didn't buy those things. So it's misinformation. And then mischaracterization too, saying things like, boy, your mom really does have a lot of mental problems. Or, boy, your mom does seem like she's angry at me all the time. Is she an angry person these days? You know, just those sorts of comments that you're mischaracterizing. You know, mom's not angry because she has anger problems. Mom's pissed off because she's been mistreated and gaslighted, and now someone's trying to brainwash her kids. So, yeah, she's angry, but not because she's just a nasty person. And they'll act afraid of the other parent. They'll do that in court sometimes, so that then the kid starts to feel afraid too. And then they'll make the child feel like that they're in danger when they're with the other parent. And then they use the same tactics, right, that on the children. And this is the whole point. This is the whole freaking point. This is why we want the children to not be spending time with you. Then this next point that I'm about to make is that they use the same tactics on the kids that they used on you, including gaslighting, triangulation, love bombing, and on and on and on. They do the same stuff. Okay. And so why is it confusing? Good segue, huh? Well, things get twisted when you're dealing with an abuser, and they're able to stay calm while you get furious. Also, the courts are on their side, and a lot of times friends and families are on their side, because every child should have a relationship with their parents, right? I mean, our culture teaches us that. And so you have this guy walking around, or this woman walking around, poor me, you know, I'm being a victim. I'm, you know, legal abuse. Somebody's legally abusing me and keeping my kids away from me. People feel sorry for them, and they're going to rally, and they're going to place that cultural expectation over actually finding out the truth of the matter. But they'll just support the person simply because you only have two parents, you know, you only have one dad, and that whole line of thinking. And then let's see. So what they'll do is they flip the script. So you're the empathic parent who has children with an abusive, manipulative parent. You're no longer together. Every time the kids come back from spending time with them, they come back with their heads filled with all kinds of stuff, and you're witnessing that. You're handling it well. You can't really say anything because you don't want to be the alienating parent, right? So your hands are tied because you're doing right by your kids, right? But after a while, it's like, I can't do this anymore. And it's not, the kids are upset, they're anxious, they're worried every time they come back. It's just, they're experiencing cognitive dissonance because the alienating, manipulative parent is telling them one thing, but then they come home and mom is actually awesome. So what's going on? And they love their dad too. But if you try as a survivor, if you try to seek justice for your kids or seek safety for your kids away from this person, coercive control is not something that is accepted as a reason. Basically, this person has to be like a felon. There has to be violence, drugs, many charges, and the inability to like keep a job or have a home where the kids can go hang out. But besides that, coercive control, psychological manipulation, psychological warfare that took place in the home in front of the kids, that's fine. It's fine. Yeah, sure, they should spend time with that person. Absolutely. So you go to try to say, no more, I don't want this, and here's why. And because women tend to be accused of this quite a bit, you're looked at as being the alienating parent, when really and truly all you're trying to do is develop a happy and healthy life for you and your kids. I got to stop now, but we can talk more about this. And like I said, I'm looking for a lawyer that I know that understands these issues, and perhaps they'd be willing to come on and answer some questions for us that might be helpful. Anyway, I hope you have a great day. Bye.